Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around is my review of the 1971 psychological thriller Wake in Fright. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Travis for requesting this review. If there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Wake in Fright is a film that was a pretty big deal a few years ago. It was debuted at the Cannes Film Festival because they found a print that was actually in good shape, so they were able to remaster it and showcase the film to a much wider audience than previously. It was one of those movies where it was pretty obscure. It wasn't really that well known. It didn't really get a lot of rub on home video. I don't even know if it had that many home video releases prior to a few years ago. And this is one of those films where it got all this praise. It still gets this praise. It's considered to be a masterpiece by a lot of people. And I honestly don't get it. Like, I don't think that it's a bad film. I like the film okay at the end of the day for its technical merits and for Donald Pleasence's just absolutely phenomenal performance in this movie. But the rest of it, I don't get why this is a masterpiece. The story isn't that compelling or interesting, other than a few ideas here and there. The pacing is way too fucking slow, because there's a lot of stuff where nothing is happening. It might as well just be a film where some poor sap just drives around in circles over and over again, because that's pretty much what's going on. He just keeps winding up at the same place. And it's one of those movies where the setting and the atmosphere is fantastic, but it's not enough to really make the film for me. I know it is for a lot of people, but this just didn't do it for me. I think in large part it's because of the lead. To me, this film has a lame duck lead. This guy sucks. He's not likable. He's not very charismatic. The script does a bad job making you sympathize with this guy. Instead of you being like, oh no, don't gamble your money away. What are you doing? Instead, you're like, what are you doing? You're a fucking dumbass. Fuck you. Why the hell do I have to keep watching you do dumb shit? You fucking dipshit. Like, really, that's what happens. You're just like, God, this guy sucks. Rather just watch Donald Pleasence be evil for the entire movie. Fuck this guy. So, that's really, honestly, one of the biggest problems I have with this film, is that it has this lead character and this school teacher who's such a lame duck and an asshole. Well, maybe he's not really an asshole, but he is pretty fucking selfish, and he's pretty fucking stupid. But maybe an asshole is a little bit too harsh. But either way, I don't like this guy. I don't like his face, and I definitely don't like the performance. The performance didn't do this film any favors either. I thought this performance was pretty awful. I don't understand why Gary Bond gets credit or a lot of praise for this. I thought he was pretty shitty, to be honest. But there are some things about this film that are really tremendous, and one of them is the direction by Ted Kotcheff. Ted Kotcheff did a terrific job with this film. This movie has some really impressive, incredible visuals, ones that definitely do stick with you, from the gambling sequence of the coin flips to the nightmarish landscapes of the Australian outback, to the way that he just really created such a surreal look to the film. It felt like a nightmare. It looked like a fever dream, soaked in alcohol and dust. And it was just a really great looking film. And it's just a shame to me that it didn't have great characters, at least consistently great characters, and a compelling narrative to tie together with such great visuals. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those people that's just gonna be happy with pretty looking pictures and nice looking shots. I need a little bit more than that. I need a film to provide a little bit more meat on the bone. And this film, after it was over, just left me starved. I was never satisfied. I was never full. It wasn't a hearty meal. I wanted more. And I didn't get it. I know there were some attempts to have some subtext with the story, with some lines of dialogue. There's a bit where Donald Pleasence's character is mentioning Socrates while two guys are in a drunken brawl. But that was pretty on the nose, and it wasn't like it was really that subtle. And yeah, I know there's a lot of stuff about toxic masculinity and alcoholism and being stuck in a dead end place and not knowing how to get out of it. And it was a scathing critique of certain parts of Australian culture at the time, or maybe even still to this day, where people just want to drink, and if you don't want to have a drink with them, then you're some kind of pariah or piece of shit in their eyes. I get it. I totally understand what they were trying to go for. That being said, it just didn't really click for me. It just ran out of steam. And it didn't run out of steam right away. Like, it started off pretty strong, and then it kind of lost me, and then Donald Pleasence's character comes in, and then I can't take my eyes off the screen, but then it's focusing on this lame duck school teacher, and then I'm like, oh, whatever, fuck that guy. Can we get back to Donald Pleasence being a scumbag? And then you have Donald Pleasence and his two buddies, drinking buddies, who are just obnoxious and a bunch of two hard-headed, stupid blokes who I'm just like, fuck these blockheads. There's just a lot of stuff going on where you're just hanging around with a lot of drunk people, and that's not my idea of entertainment. I don't know about you. It just that's not fun to me. It's the kind of thing where you're just like, can I just leave? Why do I have to be stuck with these fucking drunk assholes? That might have been the point too. Evan Jones, he wrote the script. It's based on a book by Kenneth Cook. The script, it's, to me personally, a letdown. You have an interesting idea, a concept with a lot of potential, with this school teacher who's down on his luck, who's stuck in a dead-end place in his life, and in a dead-end town. He goes on a vacation from his teaching studies, and goes to this town called the Yaba, and he hears all these great things about it from the locals, and it's not what it seems to be. In fact, it's more like a living hell, because it's just one of those things where you can't seem to escape from it. And one of the main things that just keeps you tied to it is just how overly generous people are in the town. They give you all these things. They give you free beer. And it just escalates to the point where you just wind up becoming someone who's super dependent on the yaba. You're dependent on the yaba, you're dependent on the people, you're dependent on the beer, you're dependent on all these things. And it's like a living hell. That's why there's a line of dialogue in the film from Donald Pleasence's character where he says all the little devils are proud of hell, because of the fact that it's one of those places where it is a very hellish landscape, despite how wonderful a lot of the people who were stuck in it seem to say that it is. It's their way to delude themselves into saying that it's a great and wonderful place. It's the kind of thing that would happen if you're stuck in hell for so long, that you would just try to convince yourself that maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it's actually pretty good. I like it here. And the typical sort of stuff happens where he gets involved with the locals, meets up with this police guy who invites him to this bar which has this gambling thing going on, where people are gambling their money away on coins that are being flipped in the air. And that was interesting. That created some really striking visuals and some really incredible and just very ambitious shots by Ted Kotcheff when it comes to different camera angles and different positions and different point of views and different ways to move the camera around and just to change the vocal point and the focal point. My bad, but yeah, the changes the focal point and all these things. It was just a really nice uh, setting to really play around with things visually, and it just seemed like a very hellish landscape there. It seemed like it was in a black void, and there's all these sweaty men packed into this void like sardines, and you could just see the disappointment and the sadness and the desperation in all their faces, and it was just something that honestly was kind of legitimately chilling. And this guy, he gambles his money, he actually wins, but then he gets too greedy because he wants to live the dream and get out of there and go to England with his girlfriend and fulfill his fantasy life, and he fucks up and loses it all. Then he winds up becoming uh, inebriated to the point where he can't think straight and winds up spending the night at Donald Pleasence's shack or his shanty, really. It's not really a shanty. It's a really shitty house, and he then winds up falling in with the wrong crowd and keeps getting drunk, and days turn into weeks, and it's just a really bad situation for this guy. And it's one of those things where I think you're supposed to sympathize with this guy and his plight and what he's done with his life and everything that he's lost, but the script just did a bad job making you feel that way. You really just felt that this guy deserved everything that he got and then some, because he's just being an idiot. And I think if he was more written in a way where he's more charismatic, more likable, there was more to this character, then it would actually feel tragic. But instead, it's just insipid and it's idiotic, and you're just like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Stop drinking. Get your shit together. Go to the goddamn labor office on Monday. Just stop hanging around with these fucking jerk offs. Get out. You're just like, what the fuck are you doing? You just get mad at this guy. You don't sympathize with this guy. You just get mad at. And you have sequences where the film effectively makes beer nightmarish. That's no easy task. Like, it just, these scenes of people just drinking and tons and tons of fucking beer, just pounding it down, and it just felt like it was really something out of a nightmare. Just constantly just oh, you want a beer? You want a beer? Hey, you want more beer? It's like, no, I don't want any more fucking beer. I want out of this fucking town. I want out of this fucking dead end that is my life right now. I don't want to keep drinking and trying to forget about it. So the film is pretty infamous for a sequence that features footage from an actual kangaroo hunt. It was done by professional hunters, but it's still a sequence that, yeah, it's haunting, but to me, it's overboard, and I really don't think it needed to be in the film. I would have preferred a sequence where Donald Pleasence and his drunk pals, they set up this school teacher and they turn him into their prey. It seems like it's going to be them hunting kangaroo, but really they're hunting him. And then it turns into a most dangerous game situation. And he has to think on his feet and turn the tables. And maybe they have some actual cash stashed away somewhere. They're not who they seem they are. They're not a bunch of losers who don't have any money. They just do this to make it appear that that's the case so they can take these poor saps who are down in their luck and hunt them for sport. I like that idea a lot better than scenes of them running around, driving around, being rowdy, shooting at kangaroo, and going as far as like killing and like slashing kangaroos to death. Like it was just really a grueling sequence to sit through, and it was I really don't care if kangaroo are considered to be a animal that there's an abundance of to the point where they need to be uh, curbed in terms of their population. That's fine. That's understandable. I don't need to see it, especially in this kind of graphic nature. It just distracted me from anything else in the movie. And as someone who has a pet, who has an animal, it's just something that's just very rough to watch. And it was a film that was already effective enough with its roughness and its rawness. It didn't need to go that extra mile for me. I know for some people they love it, and I think that's one of the things that really makes this film stand apart and makes it one of those masterworks. But to me, it just wasn't needed. There's a bunch of senseless, unnecessary animal cruelty. And other than that, like, what do you have? Like, there's just a lot of stuff in this film where, narrative-wise, you're just stuck in a dead end. Just going around in circles. The guy's just drinking and drinking some more, hanging around with drunks, hanging around with these people who he's starting to mooch off of. Almost bangs this dude's wife, but then he throws up because he's too drunk or because he doesn't like the sight of her. I don't know what. That's not really clear. And speaking of things that aren't clear, there's a lot of things that are very cloudy in this film in terms of some of the story bits. Like there's stuff where you're like, okay, why did Donald Pleasence help this guy at the end? He showed up at the hospital after the guy had a failed suicide attempt, and he helped him out and gave him money for a train ticket so he could get back to Tabunda, where his school teaching job is at. Like, what? Why the fuck would he help him? This guy's a sicko who almost raped the guy at one point, and oh, now he's helping him? Now he's a kind Samaritan? What the fuck was that? That was so out of place. And then it's for a film that is so raw and brutal and shows scenes of kangaroos getting brutally slaughtered and shot to death and killed. It doesn't go all the way with a lot of other things when it comes to its violence or its nature. It just kind of beats around the bush. So it doesn't go all the way with that. There's no real catharsis with the ending. Because it's like, did the guy really learn anything? Probably not. Maybe he did. You don't really see the end result of any of that. There's no realization from the guy, man, I really screwed up. No, it's like, oh, I got really lucky that the bullet didn't kill me. And I got really lucky that Donald Pleasence has a heart now. And he decides to help me out. And he's sober now. How? That's another question, too. How the fuck was he sober? How the hell was he sober? The guy was drunk for pretty much every scene in the film, and he's just drinking beer like a fucking fish, and then at the end of the movie, he's right as rain. What did he have? Get an intervention? And what happened to his two pals? What happened to a lot of people, a lot of the other characters in the film? Some of them are never even mentioned again. You don't even know what their fate is. But yeah, just not really sold on the script, not really sold on the narrative. Definitely not sold on the lead. Honestly, it would have been more interesting if it just focused more on Donald Pleasence's character and how much of a twisted maniac he is, and how he screws with people and manipulates them, and hunts people in more ways than one. That would have been more interesting to me. I feel it would have been a more compelling film and narrative overall if it just focused more on the horror elements instead of trying to be some wishy-washy drama and with some psychological thriller elements. And the performances by the cast, it's fine. Really, it's Donald Pleasence's show as Doc. This is just a powerhouse performance. Just a great, meaty role for such a wonderful actor. And he just plays such a great psycho in this. And it's just a damn shame that, to be honest, he didn't really get to have those moments that a lot of these other film psychos do that really makes them have a significant impact. Like, he had an impact because the performance is so good, but it's not really one of the best performances or best film psychos, because what does he really do? He nearly rapes the guy, gets him drunk, hangs around with a bunch of drunkards. Yeah, it's fucked up, but nothing really that intense. Nothing that incredible when it comes to a cinematic psycho. Gary Bond was awful. I thought his performance sucked. He had no charisma. It was flat. It was about as flat as the actual Australian outback. Really bad casting choice. Weak. And he's the one who really is the focus of the film from the very beginning. Chips Rafferty, I like the guy as Jock Crawford. He's the guy who is the police officer kind of character who's going around and befriending John Grant and introduces them to this underground world of gambling, all this other stuff. Sylvia Kay plays Jeanette Hines, who's this girl who's married to this other guy that essentially takes in the school teacher under his wing and gives him a place to stay and more beer. And then you have Jack Thompson as Dick, and Peter Whittle as Joe, and Al Thompson as Tim High, and John Meillon as Charlie. But that's honestly the main cast. Everyone else other than the lead did a really good job for me. The lead just sucked. He added next to nothing to this movie other than more and more problems upon more problems, and he was just a detriment to the production at the end of the day. The cinematography by the film is really quite a sight to see by Brian West. There's a lot of shots in this film that are just jaw-dropping, just really awesome in their power, and I could see why critics were like, wow, like this film really surprised me, at least visually, not really with the narrative or with the performance by the lead actor. The editing is also really excellent by Anthony Buckley. I love the editing in this film. There are some sequences that just are so well edited and create this very surreal, genuinely terrifying atmosphere and mood just by themselves. Really a tour de force of editing. It was a real treat to see such excellent editing. Like, there's a lot of shots in this where you're just like, wow, like that is pretty awesome. The music by John Scott I also really like. John Scott's a composer who has worked on a lot of films. He did the score for Lionheart, which is honestly one of my favorite scores of his. And his score here is also really solid. Also really good in terms of the composition of the notes, in terms of the variety of different notes and different instruments, and It's a really unique score, very fitting for a relatively unique film. And it's just one of those movies, though, where I just got to be honest. It just, at the end of the day, I just thought it was okay. Like, I didn't think it was one of the greatest films that I've seen from Australia or that part of the country. I mean, I would rather watch Razorback. Um, and it's one of those movies that, yeah, it captures the setting well and the atmosphere and the mood, and there are things about it that I really like, but it just doesn't have a consistently compelling narrative. The lead is a lame duck and he sucks. And you have elements with other characters and other things that really have a lot of potential, but it just feels wasted. Just like a day spent drinking, really, which is ironic that the film feels like a day that's completely put to waste by just drinking nonstop so you can forget about it the next day. And that's a shame because there are a lot of elements here that are excellent. They're really well done. But I'm probably one of the only people that feels that way because this film gets a lot of praise, gets a lot of critical acclaim, a lot of people love it, and if you feel that way, that's fine. I have no issue with that whatsoever. It just wasn't really that impressive to me as a whole. But I still liked it all right. Gotta be honest, it was worth a watch just to see Ted Kotcheff's terrific direction, to see another great, sterling, spectacular performance by Donald Pleasence, and to also see some of the other elements that were interesting, like the coin flipping, and to see the Australian outback in such genuine, disturbing glory, and then to also hear that wonderful score by John Scott. But I just wish there was more meat on the bone. I wish it was a heartier meal when it comes to the narrative and when it comes to the main character. But anyway, thank you for watching my review of Wake in Fright, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.